we've been exposed to all sorts of things out there, and we wanted to put together a useful session for you to guys look at some of the key differences and how to kind of think about it when starting your projects. Petter, if you can just jump to the next slide here. So I'll briefly introduce myself. I'll moderate the conversation between you, answer your comments from X, from Discord here live, and I'm the head of marketing here at Tatum, and to do all the talking, we have Petter here. Petter Heda, our solutions engineer. So Petter, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Right. So my name is Petter. I'm a solutions engineer here at Tatum, which you can essentially think of as a fancy way of saying I'm the bridge between technical and non-technical people. And one of the ways that I'm going to talk about today is more on the technical aspects of choosing the right chain. So we are also going to cover the business aspects as well, but it's going to be focusing on the tech aspects. That's what we do at Tatum. We provide tools for developers that make their job easier. Now, let me know in the comments whether you are a technical person or a business person or somewhere in between. Happy to learn a little bit more about who is joining from the audience, not only where you're from, but also let us know what your background is. Whether it's related to blockchain development or software development in general.
Basically, Petter, what you're saying is that we're not going to speculate on the price on which chain is going to give you more money. We're going to look at it technically and what makes sense practically for you as a builder.
Absolutely. So even though the markets are going up and down and it's a roller coaster all the way, we are not going to be discussing the price today. Today's topic is mostly about the technical and business aspects of choosing the correct chain for your use case.
All right, let's dig in then.
When you see the sign, why does it even matter what chain you choose? What is the first thing that comes to your mind, right? So there are several parameters that we are going to be discussing today, and I'm happy to read all of them, all of your thoughts in the comments below. We are always reading the comments. We are always going to be responding to them. And some of the parameters, why would you even need to consider what chains are actually going to be there? We can divide it into several categories that we are going to be covering today. And what we are going to be covering today is the chain architecture. That's one of the parameters. Other would be smart contract support, whether there are even some smart contracts or how to actually work with those smart contracts. Then we are also going to discuss the publicness or privateness of the chain, because you can have public chains, you can have semi-public chains, you can have all private chains. It really depends on your use case. And the fourth parameter that we are going to talk about today is the business parameters. So for example, how easily you can get developers to build, to expand on your application when you grow. So far, so good? All right.
So super clear.
Yeah, I see some comments. Happy to always jump in. Happy to always talk about that. I see that we have a newbie developer. We have a biz dev. We are always happy to speak to all different kinds of audiences. So whenever there is a question, whenever there is something unclear, please jump into the chat. Please let us know, and we are always happy to cover that. We can always jump back or continue in more depth if this is something that you are interested in. All right. Let's start with the first part that I just described, and that is the architecture. So what kind of architectures do we even know about, right? So what is a chain architecture? And one of the most well-known architectures you can think of is the Ethereum virtual machine. That's the EVM for short. And that's one of the ways you can describe how the chain actually works. So what we have here is you have each account that is described as an object. And for the developers here, object-oriented programming is one of the first things that you learn as a new developer. So it's very easily understandable for technical people, but not so much for non-technical people. So let me just give you a brief example. So when you think of an account as an object, it means that you have specific parameters of that, whether it's a private key, whether it's a address, whether it's a public key, whether it's some smart contract code, balance. Sometimes it's native balance. In some other chains, that might be also token balances. So in this case, you can think of each account, each wallet, as an object that covers all the parameters of that account, of that wallet. So for example, I can send transaction from one account. I can send it to one other account. That's the one sender, one recipient as well. And I can also send a transaction to a smart contract that does some action that is predefined in the smart contract. So for example, it can be a decentralized exchange that has predefined actions like I'm going to send Ether to the exchange, and I receive USDC or any other stablecoin that is again predefined within that exchange. So this is all possible on Ethereum, and you can also see that this is fairly advanced chain, one of the first that actually introduced smart contracts. But obviously, there are also more chains as we go along. So we are also going to talk about Solana, Polkadot, Bitcoin, all those other chains we are also going to cover. Now, the amount of information that I just put out there, is this something that is understandable for you? Is this something that you would like to have covered in more depth or maybe more in a shallow way? Let me know in the comments, and we're happy to continue further on.
Peter, would you say that EVM chains at this point is sort of maybe the standard that most people will be familiar with? I guess that's the sort of because of all the L2s that you had on Ethereum. Essentially, it became very widely spread amongst the blockchain developers.
That's correct. Yeah. So EVM architecture is one of the most well-known, even though there is currently Solana pushing for its space. So we are going to cover that a little bit as well. But EVM is one of the oldest chains or architectures that has introduced smart contracts, and it's definitely still the most used in terms of number of users.
All right. So, from a point of view of starting a project, would you say if you are feeling maybe least adventurous, this would be perhaps the safe place to begin?
Definitely. There are many resources available online as well as on Tatum documentation that you can read through, and it's always easy to start with a Hello World script that we actually have a couple slides after that. But it's fairly easy to start on EVMs. You don't need to learn any specific languages like Rust. Actually, you need to learn Solidity, but again, it is fairly easy to start with EVMs. Yes.
And last question for me, I promise, probably from a tooling point of view and just support for developers, I imagine also probably the most developed in that regard.
That's right. If I'm not mistaken, EVM was founded in 2015. So during those 10 years, we have seen a growth of tooling, whether it's for local development, whether it's for testing, whether it's for debugging, or generally any kind of tooling that you can use online that are available, all usually for EVM first. And that's no exception with Tatum. We cover a vast majority of EVM chains, as well as other chains, as we'll be describing in a little short while. Now, as for WebAssembly, this sounds like two words that might not be combined together, right? So you have the web technologies, and then you have the assembly, which is very close to ones and zeros. So what is going on? So WebAssembly is actually a technology, or short for WASM, is a technology that is used by Solana, by Cosmos, some Polkadot chains, and many other chains that are out there that wanted to distinguish itself from EVMs. And it's working completely different compared to EVM. So what you were used to with EVM chains, that you have one account that only has a balance of some native coin, and then you would need to ask every smart contract for every token. no, this is no longer needed in WebAssembly. And what you can do in WebAssembly is to have simple query for an account that has this balance of this token, that balance of that token, and it's all available on the chain level. So this is much easier on the chain level, but there's a caveat to that. And it sometimes might be a little bit harder for developers to get into this chain or get into this architecture of chains for the reason that usually there is Rust smart contract language involved, which is not easy for new developers. It actually requires a lot of knowledge to be able to control all memory points and everything that is advanced software development. So for that reason, it is very powerful, but it's not easy to start with.
Why would people choose specifically to start on WebAssembly over something like EVM? Is it just ecosystem based and because Solana has a lot of hype, or do you think there's something that technically pushes them towards WebAssembly?
Frankly, WebAssembly has much more possibilities compared to EVM because it's much more open ecosystem. You can do much more with it. With EVMs, you're quite limited by the technology, and it's easy to get into. Once you push the limits of EVMs and you actually need something more powerful, you need more control over the chains, that's when WebAssembly comes in. And also Solana is a big part of that, since we always see growing interest in Solana, which is based on WebAssembly. This is also a great time to start learning the WebAssembly technologies as well.
Got it. Do you want to move ahead? Yeah, UTXO.
Yeah. So everyone heard of Bitcoin, right? And the way it works is this is the original chain, the OG that you can see since 2009 that has used inputs and outputs, and the unspent transaction outputs. That's what gives the name of UTXO. So it's a basic blockchain that we have seen since 2009, and it combines inputs from the previous transactions, outputs from the previous transactions that are used as inputs for the new transactions. It's a very basic term of the architecture, but Bitcoin and UTXOs actually gave way to other blockchains that we know today. And it's always important to mention UTXO and to mention Bitcoin because without it, we would not have the other chains. And as you can see later on in the presentation, we'll also show some ways how you can actually programmatically set up Bitcoin transactions, even though people say it's impossible. It is possible. You will see. Obviously, there are many chains. So right now, we have seen increased demand for Ton, the Telegram Open Network. We have seen also Cosmos retaking its space. So Cosmos is an ecosystem of multiple chains that have inter-blockchain protocol that you can use to communicate between specific chains. So that's something that has been also completely new in the past years. And you can easily transfer funds without any third-party bridges between the Cosmos chains. That's what is really great about it. We have seen new Ethereum L2s that are actually not EVM based, like Starknet. Starknet has a complete new architecture that you can also see. There is Internet Computing Protocol, ICP, that has come in with a very interesting idea of bringing JavaScript to blockchain. Since JavaScript is probably the most used programming language worldwide with over 15 million developers, there have been some tries and attempts to bring in this popular programming language, and I've seen ICP successfully try, and we'll see how that goes for them in the future. Which chains? There's a question in the chat. So which chains I'm hyped about? If you have seen my Stack Overflow account, I'm not gonna lie. I'm a fan of specific chains, but also I do like the interoperability between all chains. So it's always important for me even though I come from the EVM environment, it's always good for me to see how we can connect multiple chains together. So, for example, if we are able to bridge chains, or whether we are able to bridge chains, bridge tokens between Ethereum and Solana, and possibly even Bitcoin, not even in the way of wrapping Bitcoin, but also in the interchain communication. And that's what I'm really hyped about.
Can I ask you a bit of a question in this regard? So, when it comes to these additional chains, like often some of them will flag that they are EVM compatible. Some are not. Obviously, UTXOs may be a little harder. But how do you, what did this makes that? Is it just simply that the chain is in some way supports that it's using EVM technology, or does that mean something else? Actually, it's in some way purposely integrated with EVM networks in some other regard.
Right. So I'm not sure I follow the question, Mantas. Could you rephrase
Let
that?
me place it just to clarify for myself. So whenever chains refer to the fact that they're EVM compatible, does that mean that they are actually run on an EVM machine, or does that mean something else? That it could be some different technology, but it is made EVM compatible in some way or another.
Right. So what we have seen is with Polkadot, for example, you have Polkadot is an ecosystem of multiple chains. Some of them are EVM compatible, but they are also compatible with the main Polkadot chain as well. So they might be running an EVM in the background, but they might be also compatible with the Polkadot main chain as well. The same goes for the Starknet that I just mentioned. So even though it's an Ethereum L2, which means that it has validation checks against the Ethereum mainnet, it also runs a completely different technology. Similar would be Tron, where it was forked off EVM. Now it has added new features that are not available in EVM. They are Tron specific. And this is one of the great ways. You can actually run EVM smart contracts to some extent on Tron, but you can also do things that are not available on the original EVM because they have been added specifically for Tron.
If I may expand on this question, is it just EVM has this unique characteristic, or is there sort of work being done to connect WebAssembly, UTXOs in some way, or is it just EVM has this unique characteristic?
WebAssembly is a great example of that, what you mentioned. So, for example, with the Cosmos chains, you can use the IBC protocol to send funds, and not only tokens, but also messages, arbitrary messages between chains, which might be useful for interchain applications. Think of a decentralized exchange or a gaming platform or anything where you actually want your users to be migrating between chains because that gives you the larger user base. So this would be one of the great examples how you can actually make use of those chains.
Got it. Thanks.
Now, we have already covered a little bit of the naming of Solidity and Rust. So let me just show you a very short example of the Hello World. This is something that you have probably seen, Solidity syntax. And if you are a developer, you have definitely seen this. If you are a non-developer, I apologize in advance for about 2 minutes that I'm going to be geeking out about these smart contract languages. But Solidity is a fairly easy programming language where you can see it's a typed language, and you can define all kinds of functions. You can define all kinds of string-based properties or type-based properties generally. And what we also have on EVM is a Viper programming language that currently Solidity is used on 99% of smart contracts. Viper is used on about less than 1% of smart contracts, even though I would say that Viper is one of the most advanced blockchain programming languages that we have here. Solidity has brought in some security checks and integer overflow checks, for example, about a year ago. Viper has it for 4 years, I believe. So even though it's not the majority used language, I definitely encourage you, if you are a developer and you are exploring the chains, check Viper. It's one of the great languages that is out there. And it's always one of the advanced languages you can always use. Obviously, you can code in assembly if you'd like, but this is a step how you can actually become a better coder and how you can actually learn some new things. Happy to support Viper. Now for the WebAssembly, all of you have probably heard of Rust. So Rust is the language that you can use on Solana. And this is just a short example of how it looks like. So it's a functional language, as you can see, and you can also define messages. You can define something, callbacks, something that is returned back to the chain. It is somewhat different from Solidity. I see some comment in the chat about print hello world. So yes, thank you for that. Exactly. It's a language that is fairly advanced, so just be aware. But you can do very great things with Rust. So if you are aiming to be advanced developer, definitely can support Rust. Now, someone has told me that you cannot code smart contracts in Bitcoin. So I'm here to prove you wrong. Bitcoin is not originally intended for smart contract, and it's purposefully not Turing complete, which means that it will never have a language on purpose that you can use to code advanced smart contracts like decentralized exchanges and everything. But what you can actually do is you can have time supported, you can have time shifted transactions that are only available for a specific amount of time. You can have multi-sig, and these are feature. You can have password protected lock. So, for example, if you send a transaction to someone, you can protect it with additional password that they need to know in order to be able to spend this transaction. These are some functions that are included in the Bitcoin programming language that is simply called script. And it is on purpose, not Turing complete, which means on purpose, it is a very simple, very straightforward programming language that you can use. As a developer myself, I'm always hyped about this when you can actually code on Bitcoin because it was originally not intended to. But over the years, the community around Bitcoin has decided to at least give us a little bit of coding possibilities, even though it is purposefully limited. So you cannot actually mess it up, and it is purposefully limited because of security reasons as well. So even though there might be some bugs on the regular decentralized exchanges or decentralized applications that you can see, there's purposefully not a space to make a mistake on the Bitcoin language. So if you are into advanced coding, definitely check Bitcoin script as well.
And Petter, where do you stand on the language on building on top of Bitcoin? Essentially, if you're you stepping into the space and considering projects, is there just more like a hobby area? Do you see it kind of if you just want to try it, or does it really make for you pragmatic sense to actually go the UTXO route?
Bitcoin is the oldest chain, and it is still one of the most widely used in terms of value that is being exchanged across the borders. So even though we see Ethereum as one of the most used by number of users, even though we see Solana increased adoption, Bitcoin is always going to be the most possibly stable chain, even though it's not fast, but it is there for different reasons. Right, so some people call Bitcoin the digital gold. I completely agree with that, and I believe it has its space for conservative applications. So definitely not for gaming, definitely not for exchanges or something, but for more conservative approach, yes, Bitcoin would be the number one.
Understood. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. And I have spoken about JavaScript being ported into blockchain. We can actually see it also in some Cosmos chains. We can also see some specific complete new languages. For example, Cairo, that is a new language that has been developed for the purpose of StarkNet, the Ethereum L2s. So all of those chains serve different purposes. And sometimes you need a new programming language to be able to cover this use case the best. So sometimes you even have other languages that might be chain specific, but generally Solidity, Rust, and sometimes JavaScript as one of the most favorite development languages out there. Uh, these are the languages that are often used by smart contract developers.
Excellent.
All right. Before we move into the public versus private, Mantas, do you see there any questions or any comments?
Yeah, not at the moment. So our audiences on X and Discord are quiet, just here watching your presentation. So I think you can go ahead.
All right. So speaking of blockchain and corporations, that doesn't go together, right? Or does it? This is a news headline from a couple of years ago where ING has actually launched a zero knowledge chain or specific zero knowledge use case. I know you might have seen the ZK zero knowledge headlines being more and more active outside of the development communities. So not only ING as the insurance company, but also IBM as one of the largest traditional companies in hardware development. So what is going on? Why would they do it? Well, specifically for the ING, that would be the reason for security concerns. And that means that they didn't want to post the data out there to the public. They still wanted to share the data between the group of the companies that they have in control, but also they needed blockchain because of the decentralization between those specific companies. In the world of those large businesses, you often have use cases where you might want to validate something, but you don't trust the other party, so you would need some decentralized way how to do that. Blockchain is the solution. So private chains can be actually used for security reasons as well. I have heard of some use cases, for example, with medical data. You would not want your medical data to be available publicly. Same goes for insurance data, as we just seen. So this would be one of the reasons. Other reasons is that when you are having a blockchain, when you are having a public blockchain, you cannot modify the existing chain. When it goes to private chains, you can modify it if you need to, and if it has been allowed previously for the chain to be modified. So this might be a double-edged sword. So, for example, it might be good to be able to modify that depending on the specific use case, but sometimes depending on the specific use case, it might not be so good idea. So it really depends on the specific use case. Obviously, when you modify your users' data, they might stop trusting you, right? So it might be also important for you to inform your users when you are running a private chain that this is something that we are allowed to do. Please explicitly allow us this to be happening, and that way you don't lose their trust as well. So far, so good.
So far clear. Yeah, thanks.
All right. Now let's just quickly jump into some of the parameters for the non-developers here. So what we really need to care about when we are deciding which chain to actually use is, are we okay with 10 minutes for processing a transaction? Specifically, I'm talking about Bitcoin right now. So even though Bitcoin might be one of the most stable and safest chains out there, some users might not be willing to wait 10 minutes to process their transaction. Think of buying a coffee, for example. You don't want to stand in the line 10 minutes just to have the transaction confirmed. On the other hand, you might have some very, very fast chains where the transaction is processed under a second, which might be great for buying coffee, but you wouldn't really trust that chain if it's known for certain instabilities. And for example, if the chain might fall down, you wouldn't trust it with your company data, right? So it always is a trade-off whether you want something safer and it's usually slower, or whether you want something more experimental, but it's definitely much faster. This is what I just covered as well. So even though it might be processed in 400 milliseconds, it might not be a great idea to rely on an unstable chain in that matter. Speaking of, not only Ethereum is in your users MetaMask, but also Solana is in their Phantom. You have Ton as in the wallet application of Telegram, and there are many other chains that are already included in the applications that we use every day. Whether you might want to send Bitcoin and then actually have them install Bitcoin D as the application and have them sync a chain for a week. Not really. This is not something you would want your users to do every day. So in that case, you have Ethereum in MetaMask, you have Solana in Phantom, you have the Ton wallet within the Telegram application already. So this is something that also might make sense for you and for your users. Give them something that they can actually already use. Speaking of chain adoption, this is the same thing. If you find the perfect chain, but no one really uses it, there is a high probability of it being down after a month, after a year, for example. Might not be the best chain, but again, it really depends. If your users are already using Solana, give them an application on Solana. If they are already using Bitcoin, you might consider using Bitcoin as for the application as well. Now, speaking of growing your application, you might be fine with creating a prototype or proof of concept within a month. But once you need to grow your team and you need to learn new programming language, or you need to find a developer. Well, this is a screenshot that I just recently made from my LinkedIn. Everyone is looking for a Rust developer. It's not easy to find them. There are not enough Rust developers. There are not enough Solidity developers. There are generally not enough blockchain developers. So if you are a business person out there, also keep that in mind, that you would need to be able to find the developers if you need to grow your chain as well. Now, will the chain be here in a year, in 5 years, in 10 years? It really depends on the expected timeline of your application, right? So maybe you just want to build a meme coin and it's going to not matter in a month whether the meme coin still exists or not. Maybe you want to build a exchange that you are planning to keep running for tens of years. So again, if you want the application to be there, you might also need the chain to be there as well. So in this case, I would also suggest some of the more conservative chains. And it's a question of preference whether we put in Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, maybe Optimism, or maybe some of the completely new chains. It really depends on the use case as well.
And this was going to be my question: migration and expansion. So go ahead, cover it.
All right. And even though you choose the chain that might be the best for your use case, the best for your needs at the moment when you are building the application, hopefully your application grows and your users are coming in. And with that, you also have new user base when their needs are possibly changing. So how you can actually work with that, how you can migrate to a new chain, right? So it's important to say that sometimes you will need to expand to other chains or also migrate to completely new chains as well. So for that matter, it's always possible to do that. And you always need to think about several parameters here. And I'm just going to pick few because I'm not going to read the whole presentation. But for example, do you have the users that are going to be on the new chain? Do you have the tooling for them? So if they have previously used MetaMask, it might be a good idea to give your new users some chain that they can also import to MetaMask, so you don't have to teach them how to use a new wallet, for example. Or is network security important for you? So for example, when you are working with law-based data or medical data, something that you cannot lose, it's also important for you to consider this. Sometimes you might be migrating to a new chain simply because you receive a grant, you receive a subsidy from the chain provider. It's also possible. So just think of that as well. And obviously, some of the most important reasons is decreasing the transaction cost. So I've seen many applications that have started on Ethereum on L1, and the transaction costs just drove them crazy. So for that reason, they decided to migrate to L2s, which was fairly simple from the technical standpoint. But they also needed to do a little bit of research. They also needed to adjust their applications for the specific new chain. And this is one of the ways how you can actually do that. If you are just reading on-chain data, it's fairly simple. You just switch the parameter of which chain you are going to be using, and it's simple as that. If you are sending transactions, it really depends. Does the new chain have the same architecture? That's something you need to think about when you are sending the transactions. So am I going to build a transaction from a UTXO now? Or am I going to build it from a Ethereum-based object or WebAssembly-based object, which is completely different? Do I need to learn all of those new things? Well, sometimes you need to learn. Sometimes you actually don't need to learn, because that's what we do at Tatum, right? So even though all of those different chains might be completely different, we do all the hard work in the background. So you can actually just switch the chain with the parameter. And whether you are sending a transaction or getting notified about a new incoming transaction on Ethereum, on Solana, on Bitcoin, on Optimism, Cosmos, anything, this is just a parameter in the chain ecosystem. So here is an example from the Tatum documentation where you are actually sending. So this is actually retrieving token data of an address. And as you can see on the right side, chain is a selector where you can see, hey, I want all transactions from this address on Ethereum or Celo, or there's a different endpoint for Solana. You can also receive notifications on that. Mantas, let me just stop sharing for a second. I am going to switch to my other window with the documentation, and I am going to show how easy is that, okay?
In the meantime, guys, if anyone has a question, just drop it in the chat. We'll walk you through it, either our platform or anything chain specific.
Can you see my screen with the documentation now?
We do.
All right. So as you can see, this endpoint, this is from the Tatum documentation, and you can see the endpoint that gives you the list of transactions for a specific address. So I have already prepared the call here. And as you can see, this is, I think I have chosen Vitalik's address for this, so that's why there are so many transactions. But you can choose Ethereum here. And what is a great feature that I really like about this documentation is that you can just configure the parameters in the web window. I can also choose to have just fungible transactions, for example, or just NFTs, or just native transactions. And I have pasted my API key here, so I can already hit try it. And as you can see, this is the result. So if I choose only NFTs, it's going to change, right? So we have seen the change in the transaction hashes, and we have all the important information that we need. So whether it's the transaction hash, whether it's the timestamp of the transaction, token ID, since these are NFTs, the token address, which would be the collection, and everything. This would be counter address 0. So I'm guessing this was a mint, for example. All you can do, and as simple as that, you can switch to Binance Smart Chain, and it's going to show different list of transactions that were coming to this address. You can switch to Polygon, and it's loading. But generally, you can see that, for example, for several chains as well. So yeah, Polygon has loaded right now, and again, you can choose the chain as just a parameter, as was mentioned.
So Peter, I imagine migrating vertically from L1 from like Ethereum to Polygon fairly straightforward. Is it the same if you're going from EVM to WebAssembly, or is that a bit of a heavier lift?
So if you were using the chain from the Euro RPCs or anything, it would be a little bit of work. Yes, I can imagine. But with Tatum, it's fairly easy to do that. And for example, setting up notifications on incoming transactions. With some chains, it's possible to do natively. With some chains, it's definitely not possible to do natively. With Tatum, it's possible to do everything. So in this pattern. So for example, you want to get notified on incoming transactions on Ethereum. All right, done. On incoming transactions on Solana. All right, done. On Bitcoin, yeah, done as well. So it's just a matter of choosing just a parameter.
The responses then become there are obviously standardized in some way between chains, making you fairly simple. It's essentially you can maintain the same code base for different chains.
Yeah, and that's one of the great advantages of this approach, that you always receive a standardized response in terms of there is a sender address, there is a recipient address, there is the amount that is already calculated with the correct number of decimals. So you don't need to care about any of that. Just choose it as the parameter, though.
Great.
All right. Any further questions that you would have?
At the moment, from our audience, let me check X. I hope people are watching us but staying silent.
All right. Maybe let's give the audience a little moment to ask their questions before we wrap up. Mantas,
Yeah,
is
sure.
there anything? Sorry,
Yeah,
go
that's
on.
definitely guys. So if you want to drop your question, we'll answer it right now. Obviously, go to the Tatum's documentation and just try this yourself for many different chains, many different methods. See what you can find there. There's a lot really to go through. Better yourself. You said you are an EVM guy, but if you were starting blockchain right now and knowing everything that's available, would you still go the EVM route or would you go Solana?
So when I started blockchain development around 2020, there was nothing much more than just EVM. So it was a very simple choice back then. Nowadays, I would really go to the technology that seems the most interesting to me personally, right? So whether I'm a mobile developer or web developer or C++ developer working on embed software, for example, there's always a way how you can get into blockchain from the field that you have already seen and that you have already worked in. I know that some university students learn Rust, which might be very useful on Solana. So again, if you are learning Rust, go for Solana. If you are interested in the vast ecosystem of Ethereum, definitely start learning Solidity. If you'd like to work on corporate applications with blockchain usage, they are definitely not going to be going for the new hype chain. They are going to be using Bitcoin. So that's also the way how you can make that happen.
Thanks a lot. Okay, let me just check. So no questions at the moment. We'll share the deck and later with the people who attended. You can review it again. Check the documentation. We'll include all the relevant links as well. And we just want to thank everyone for attending. We love sharing information with you. And Petter, thank you for taking the time to walk us through it.
Mantas, thank you so much for everything today. And thank you, our audience, for being active, for asking questions. It was really nice being presenting and interacting with you today. Hopefully, we'll see you soon.
All righty. Take care. Bye-bye.